the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Got here our sheets for today. So I missed last week in person, but going online, and George did a great job of talking about Joseph's rise to power. Well, a lot of what he was, sharing and talking about was how Joseph really grew into this role as a leader, right? And to kind of summarize, all of chapter 41, which was, Pharaoh has this dream. He's not sure how to interpret the dream, and none of his none of the people around Pharaoh know how to interpret the dream. And then finally the butler, remembers, like, oh yeah, there's this guy in prison. He was really good at interpreting dreams, right? And so that's how Joseph gets taken out of jail. He gets cleaned up, and he interprets the dream for Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh pretty much immediately says, like, okay, we need to, start planning. We need somebody who's wise and discerning, and he sees this in Joseph, and so he makes him second to Pharaoh. And then Joseph begins to prepare Egypt for the drought that is coming. So there's 7 good years in which there will be a surplus, and then 7 years of drought coming. And one of the things that was brought out last week, which I thought was a really, really nice point, was that Joseph's life experiences prepared him for this stage, right? And one of the things, like, when you really reflect on Joseph, like, we've looked at multiple times where he's in a situation, and like, probably everything about him wants to be out of that situation, right? He's thrown by his brothers in the pit. He's sold by his brothers, to a bunch of Ishmaelite traders. He gets sold into Potiphar's house. Then he gets thrown into prison. So all of these situations, like, you ask Joseph, where do you want to be? He's going to say, like, well, I want to be at home, right? I don't want to be in these situations. But despite his desire to be at home, he's still committed to the situation, where when he was in Potiphar's house, he worked hard. When he was thrown in prison, he worked hard. And in both those situations, he rose up to be, second to the highest person, right? There was no other higher position he could be in. So he held in tension this, like, don't want to be here, but while I'm here, I'm going to make the best of it, right? And that's how we embrace our seasons in life, and how we gain the most out of it. Too often times when we're in difficult seasons, we focus on, well, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this, right? I wish this would change. And when we emphasize this too much, we forget to commit, right, to where God has us. And then we don't learn the lessons that we need. And Joseph needed to learn the lessons of what it is to lead in Potiphar's house. He needed to learn how to lead under bad situations in prison, right? And all those prepared him for what he was going to be thrust into, right? Because managing Potiphar's house and managing the prison are peanuts compared to managing Egypt in preparation for a drought, right? So we have to look at ourselves and say, like, well, how do I commit to holding these things in tension? I don't like where I am, but I have to learn the lessons of where I am, right? So that's a really important point. All right. As we go forward, any questions on last week? All right. So going forward, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about forgiveness today. Okay? And I want to open up with some questions. If you were to define forgiveness, how would you define it? Let me ask you, well, what's forgiveness? How would you define it?
Acceptance of pain.
Acceptance of pain. Okay.
Not holding a grudge.
Okay, so you define it as not holding a grudge.
So, like, when you forgive someone, doesn't mean like you have to be friends with him again, but like at least don't be bothered by his actions, or like don't hold a grudge for like some time, and just deal with it, like let it go. And yeah, like, but you don't have to be like as close as to him as before.
Okay, so you're kind of, you know, you can forgive somebody, but you don't have to reconcile with them. Right, so reconciling is kind of bringing the relationship back to what it was before. And that's not forgiveness, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Right, you don't have to go to what it was, but forgiveness is about not holding a grudge and not being angry.
Yeah.
Okay, how else would you define forgiveness? Everybody online, just making sure you can hear.
Yes, we hear you, Abuna.
Great, great.
Yes.
All right, good see you.
I mean, there is also self-forgiveness.
Okay, it's another part of forgiveness.
Like you have to forgive yourself for like the sins or like whatever you do, in order to like go, like move forward and like move in your life. Like you can't like stay at one zone in your life and like be regretful or anything. Like you just have to move forward.
Okay. Anybody else want to define forgiveness?
Being understanding of your own feelings towards that person that is upsetting you, or it's like holding you back from whether to like grow out of it and move into the healing process of
Okay,
whatever that case may be.
okay. I'm just taking definition. Anybody online want to take a stab?
Yeah, I agree with not holding a grudge and kind of letting it go is sort of what forgiveness is. And it has to do with understanding, like being understanding that people make mistakes.
Okay, all right.
And not to not to have a tendency to seek revenge and remove all your bad feelings from your heart, like anger, revenge, and madness.
Right, so it's this removal of like bad feelings and anger and revenge towards the person that has hurt you. Okay. Good, good, good. All right, next question. What is so challenging about forgiveness?
I mean, Mina mentioned a good point, like understanding that like something is bothering you, like you're not denying or like you're not ignoring or you're not like trying to forget about it and like go on with your life. No, you have to like sit with yourself. You have to like acknowledge this is like bothering me. I'm really mad, but I'm gonna like grow out of it. I'm gonna accept it. And like, yeah.
Okay. So those are, it's hard to do that, to really like look deep and sit with yourself, because that could be very painful.
Yeah, sometimes it just stays at the back of your mind and it comes back at you, like backfired at like certain situations, and you're not realizing what was going on until you have like a moment with yourself and like, okay, yeah, that was because this situation or not.
All right. What else is challenging about forgiveness?
I think sometimes we hold ourselves or other people around us to like a standard of some sort. So when they let us down or when we let ourselves down, we're like, how could you do that? Or like, I thought you were better than this, or I never thought you'd do something like this. So kind of moving past like the expectations or the standards we set for ourselves and for people. And like she said, like realizing that like, people make mistakes and yeah.
Good. You're all really good.
And also challenging is like forgiveness is like opposing your normal reflexes and your normal response and your nature.
Yeah.
Your nature to respond.
Yeah.
And you're feeling that you're angry and you're hurt, and you want to restore what happened.
That's a really good one. Just want to make sure it's good answers. I'm going to make sure everybody heard it online. Is that Don't worry, by the end of the series, we'll get the mic close to you. Well, Melanie was saying a really good one where, one of the hardest things is to stop your knee-jerk reactions, right? To when you're hurt and you want to come back with anger or hurt back, right? And your natural defense mechanisms, right? To really put those on hold and to control them so that you can process through forgiveness. So that was a really good answer. All right. How long should forgiveness take when you're really, really hurt?
As long as it takes.
I didn't understand.
How, like, when you're really, really hurt by somebody, how long should forgiveness take?
For as long as you take to process and to move on and let go of, all the grudges or
Okay.
feelings that you have towards that person that it has you angry and upset.
Okay. So kind of as long as it takes. Anybody disagree?
We're not.
It depends on the condition of your heart and where you want to go with others in the relationship.
Sorry, you're saying it depends on where you want to go with the relationship?
And it's the condition of your heart.
The condition of the heart. Gotcha. Good. And Jennifer said a really good point. Well, we're not God, so it's not going to happen in a day. And to emphasize that point, one time I was talking to a counselor, and they pretty much said the same thing, because I was really struggling with forgiveness, and he just looks at me, he's like, well, you're not God, so don't expect to forgive overnight. So good point. Good point. All right, last question. I know there's a lot, okay, but what do we risk if we do not forgive? What's at risk if we do not forgive?
Everything.
I'm going to ask you to elaborate. Ed.
Wow. Yeah, forgive me. I got a throat congestion, but
No worries.
no. If you don't forgive, then how will you be forgiven?
Okay.
We all need forgiveness. Regardless. So, to forgive is a way of life. It's an acceptance of, there's something that was not right with you or with someone else. You got to make it true. You got to reconcile as best you can. So the spirit will flow. The lack of forgiveness is a big blockage to the Spirit of God.
Agreed. And just to emphasize your first point, even when we recite the Lord's Prayer, it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So it's like we're asking God to forgive us our trespasses because it's contingent on our forgiveness of others. Right? So if we choose not to forgive, then we will not be forgiven. Right? So what are you going to say?
I said peace.
Peace. Okay.
And unforgiveness being like a fire in your heart. So if you continue to prevent anger in your heart, you're burning actually and continue.
Yeah. So it was really good. What was said was that, we get consumed by our own anger if we choose not to forgive. Right. And as much as we think like holding on to our anger is against the other person, truly we're the ones who are suffering when we choose not to forgive, not the other. Half the time, the other individual has no idea that we're burning with anger, but we're the one.
Lack of growth.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Lack of growth.
Lack of growth, right? So we don't grow
Spiritually.
Right?
Well, the lack of forgiveness is like hate, and we should have no hate in our lives.
True. All right, all good answers. For the sake of time, I do want to move on. I know we spent a lot of time talking, but it's important because this last part of Joseph's life, which we're going to cover over this week and next week, we are going to extend the series by 1 week, really chronicles a journey of forgiveness, right? So in order for us to really benefit, like, we need to see the process of forgiveness taking place in one of the main characters of the Bible, which is Joseph, right? So that's why I wanted to spend a lot of time kind of digesting forgiveness. Now, I asked you guys for a definition. I have a definition that I want to offer up, and it's a definition that comes out of a book called Choosing. Forgiveness is a Choice, okay? And this is a fantastic book. It's actually written by a psychologist out of University of Wisconsin-Madison. His name is Earnhardt or Earnwright. I'm butchering the last name, but that's okay. And he did 10 years of research on forgiveness. And this book was a bit of a compilation of his research. Let me get the slides up, everybody. All right, so the definition that I want to throw out there for everybody to chew on, and I'll read it twice. It says, when unjustly hurt by another, we forgive when we overcome the resentment towards the offender, not by denying our right to the resentment, but instead by trying to offer the wrongdoer compassion, benevolence, and love. As we give these, we as forgivers realize that the offender does not necessarily have the right to such gifts. Okay, I'll read it again because I know it's a mouthful. All right, when unjustly hurt by another, we forgive when we overcome the resentment towards the offender, not by denying our right to resentment, but instead by trying to offer the wrongdoer compassion, benevolence, and love. As we give these, we as forgivers realize that the offender does not necessarily have the right to such gifts. Okay? What response do you have towards this definition of forgiveness? Agree, disagree, it's good.
I think I agree.
Would you agree?
Like that last part, like sort of emphasizes that we don't forgive. I mean, we don't deserve God's love, but instead He still gives it to us regardless, whether if we deserve it or not. So I think we given it like regardless if whether that person deserves it or not is one of the main qualities, or like I think a huge quality that God has, that He has shown us, that we don't necessarily see or think about in most situations.
Okay. Yeah, see that? Anybody else have any thoughts about the definition? It is the highlight. I would never, if I was in your position and somebody asked me, I would never spit out a definition like that. Okay, so don't worry, I wouldn't expect you guys. It's just about brewing conversation, right? But I think it's like, I really like this definition because it shows that forgiveness is very much an active process, right? It's not passive. It's not a denial of, that something wrong happened. It's not denying our right to be angry. It's not denying, resentment, like a natural human response. It doesn't deny this. It actually says, like, yes, you have the right to it, right? But we choose to do something different with it, right? Instead of trying to hold it over them and allow the anger to consume us, we try and offer something else instead, right? So I really like this definition, and I come to it from time to time because I think it does a really good job of capturing how hard this is, right? That instead of like holding on to anger and resentment, we try and offer gifts, which is not the same as reconciling, right? But it is very, very different than just saying, oh, that didn't hurt me. I'm fine. Right? So, because of what forgiveness is and how active a process is, it's important to approach it as a journey, right? And a journey is important because, like, if you've ever gone like on a journey, you know, like you start, you stop, there's a U-turn, like, you know, there's back and forth and different things like that. So all this stuff kind of captures this idea of a journey. And so when we look at forgiveness, forgiveness is a journey. And this book also does a really good job of phasing out this process of forgiveness, and it's in 4 phases. Everybody here has a piece of paper, but for everybody online, all right, we're gonna just quickly talk about it, just to give us a rough framework for this journey of forgiveness, because we're also going to reflect on it with respect to Joseph. All right, so when we talk about the phases of forgiveness, phase 1 is uncovering your anger, right? And questions that go into this idea of uncovering your anger is, have you avoided dealing with your anger, right? And frequently people end up with addictions because they're trying to figure out how to avoid or deal with their anger, right? Have you faced your anger? And this was something we were saying earlier, like, have you sat down and really thought to yourself, well, how much am I really bothered by this? Right? Has anger affected your health? We know that if we hold on to anger, there's high blood pressure, there's depression, anxiety, you know, a lot of physical health effects with regards to anger. And then we're going to skip that one, but has the injury, right, or the insult towards you changed the way you see the world, right? And sometimes, because of how egregious, like, somebody can hurt us, it can change the way that we see the world, right? If we're hurt so bad, we can come back and say, like, I can't understand how somebody can do something like this. How could God make a person like this who does something like this, right? It can change how we view the world and how we view God, right? But that speaks to the depth of our pain. Right?
Something like we can't trust someone anymore, or we can't let someone get closer to us because we don't want to get hurt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, that's a really good point. Like, I get hurt by somebody and I transfer my hurt towards God and say, no, you allowed this, you stay away. Right? This is what, like, anger in response to a hurt can do. So this is natural. All right. Phase 2 is deciding to forgive. Right. And this kind of comes when we realize, like, what I've been doing for quite some time just hasn't worked. I've tried to ignore it. I've tried to tell myself, well, it didn't bother me. But in reality, it keeps on coming up. Right. And like, I'm walking down the street and somebody like crosses in front of me, and like, triggers me, and I get angry. Right? Somebody says one line and it reminds me of the person that, like, did something to me, and all of a sudden, like, I'm in a flare. So clearly what I was doing isn't working. Right? So, deciding to forgive is realizing I really haven't forgiven, and what I was trying to do didn't work. Right? And we're willing to begin this process. Right? We're willing to begin this journey. All right, phase 3, working on forgiveness. So parts that go into working, this phase 3 is working towards understanding, right? Trying to maybe understand the person that hurt you. Well, why did they do that? Why did they act like that? Why did they lie about this? Why did they think that that was okay? Right? And in that process of trying to understand, frequently what we can come across is this understanding or beginning to feel a bit of compassion. Maybe the person who hurt us, right, growing up, had a very, very abusive father. right? And as a kid, they couldn't do anything. But that abuse year after year after year produced the individual that hurt them, right? I can have compassion on the kid. I may have a hard time finding compassion on the adult, right? But no kid should have to deal with that. So in trying to understand some of the story, it can help us work towards compassion, and that can also help us accept the pain, because we can also look and say, just using our current example, is that, well, I can understand, well, that happened. I really feel bad for his childhood, and like he didn't, like, as much as it seems like they really meant to do that to me, I can understand that maybe they didn't, and I can accept the pain because I can see the whole picture and led up to that, right? And then possibly giving the offender a gift. And giving the offender a gift isn't like sending them a bouquet of flowers, right? That's not what we're talking about. But giving an offender a gift is, while you're sitting down and you're going through everything that happened, we can catch ourselves in like the thought process of like, well, if I were to see this person on this day, I would totally embarrass him and I would do X, Y, and Z, right? We can play out revenge in our minds. But giving them a gift is stopping the reel of revenge in our minds and then saying, I'll pray for them. That's a gift. Not wishing them to die in a car accident, that's a gift, right? Hoping they don't get hit by a bus, that's a gift, right? Those are gifts. They're internal gifts, right? And they're very, very different than wishing evil upon them. Again, we're not running up and giving them a hug. We're not inviting them to dinner. But we are catching ourselves, which is something you said, is like to not like continually cast evil motivations against them, right? Then the last part of this process of forgiveness is this discovery and release from our emotional prison.
May I have like a question before?
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
move on? Okay.
Please.
How would I know it's not my fault? Like, how would I know? Because sometimes we're like, okay, I get bothered by like action, or like sometimes I doubt myself. Okay, like maybe it's my expectation, or maybe it's my perspective, or like the way I see things.
Okay.
Like the other person, he didn't do anything wrong, but like it's me who took it the wrong way. Like, because sometimes I feel like, okay, it's not like every time I get bothered or like I get hurt by someone, it doesn't have to be the other one who is the offender, or like who is like the bad guy. Like,
So that I would put that in phase 3 where it says work towards understanding.
okay,
It's like challenging yourself to look beyond the immediate incident, right? The immediate injury is to say like, well, let me try and understand why this happened. And that's where you can come across like the example that you're saying is like, well, maybe I see like I have an issue in how I interpret things. And it's not so much, what they did is rather benign, but my interpretation of it is very negative, right? That I would say goes into work to understand the picture. Okay. Right, because that can help us dissipate some of the anger that we're experiencing when we have a clearer vision of what's going on. Question. So, on phase 4, it's kind of this release from the emotional prison, because we were saying earlier that one of the risks that come with not forgiving is we get consumed by anger, right? The other person has no idea. We're the ones losing. And so when we begin to release ourselves from this prison, right, we can understand that there was a reason behind my suffering. Like, weren't we looking last week and seeing how Joseph suffered, but his suffering prepared him to be the leader that he became as second to Pharaoh, right? So there is a purpose behind this, right? And then somebody said also like discovering or realizing that like, well, I'm a sinner too. And as much as like I emphasize the person who hurt me. What I de-emphasize is how I could have hurt somebody else in the same way. Right? We can become blinded to that. But realizing that just as this person caused me a big pain, I could have caused somebody else. And I likely have, and I'm not aware of it. Right? Because many times, it's not infrequent that the person who hurt you has no idea that they did it. And how many times, like, maybe somebody's come up to you and said, like, when you did that, it really hurt, it really burned. And you're like, I had no idea that you took it that way. Right? So perception is important. Discovering that you're also not the only person that's been hurt in the history of the world. It's always good. And we see that like God is using this pain in order to teach me something. And then, really when we offer up that forgiveness and we choose to release our anger, like we find this freedom, right? We find freedom. So I think it's a beautiful like synopsis of what happens as we go through forgiveness. And just to kind of give another caveat, like in this book, Forgiveness is a Choice, he was looking at people who were like raped, men who wanted to keep a child, but the woman in the relationship had an abortion without their approval, right? So there's incest, the cases of incest. So they were looking at people who were deeply hurt, right? This wasn't like, I stole my milk money and I'm really upset. No, he's talking about people who are really hurt, right? And this is the process of forgiveness that they kind of detail out of the book. Okay? All right. Yes.
I feel like praying for them is very hard. Not with the normal people.
No, I don't want you to say it's not for the normal people, right?
I mean, the
Because
common people.
Huh?
For the common people, it's very hard. And I don't know if it's okay to complain about them in front of God. I think I want to express my anger and our relation with God, like father and son. If my son came to me complaining about his teacher or hurt him, or I will go to the teacher and talk to him because he's my son and he's hurt. So what is the problem to complain about them in front of God? Because he's our father and he told us not to get revenge by ourselves. But he is just a judge also. So where is his justice? And if I have that confusion and I want to bring that confusion in front of him, but I'm not sure if
I think
have
that's
the
totally
answer.
fine. No, that's totally fine to be angry and upset and frustrated, and to even say like, I wish bad things on this person. Like, God is not going to respond based on like, oh, you wish the bus? I will bring the bus down Fifth Avenue when he gets off like the sidewalk and nail him because you asked me for it in prayer. No, he's not going to do that, right? Just like, going to the example that you said, like our, child may come and express like, I'm really upset at this teacher. And what's the child going to say? Like, they're so bad and they're retarded and like, I wish I could like punch him in the face and go to school and you punch him in the face. We're going to go to school and punch him in the face? No. Right? But we are going to say like, okay, well, I will act on your behalf. Right? So we have to synthesize the complaint from a child. And then, we take the best action we can as a parent. God does the same. He hears, but he doesn't respond in the way that we want. If God responded always in the way that we want, all of us would be dead because somebody has wished us dead, right? What it is. So thank God he doesn't listen and respond to everything that we want. But we can express our anger to him. We can express our frustration. That's not a problem. But I think that goes in phase one of uncovering the depth of your right? You remember, this is a journey. So you're gonna go to phase one, go to phase two, and be like, okay, I'm really ready to forgive. And then something happens, you're like, oh, I'm really upset. Back in phase one, and then like I start to move towards phase two, and then maybe even I say one prayer, but then something happens, and I'm back, and I'm discovering, well, my anger's a lot, my hurt is a lot deeper than I realized. That's not a problem. That happens, right? And we're actually going to see it in Joseph. Okay. Do you have a question?
No, no.
Okay. All right. Awesome. 8:35. We haven't even started, but this was really good, guys. All right. So let's hope we don't expand to 3 more weeks. All right. So we're going to jump into Genesis 42, and we're going to read verses 1 through 12. 1 through 12.
When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, why do you look at another? And he said, indeed, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down to that place, buy for us there, that we may live and not die. So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befell him. And the sons of Israel went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was the governor over the land, and it was he who told to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brother came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them. He acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of the Canaan to buy food. So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamt about them and said to them, you are spies. You come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said to him, no, my lord, but your servants have come to buy food. We are all one man's sons. We are the honest men. Your servants are not spies. But he to them, no, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land.
All right. What's happening to Joseph?
His brothers are coming
Okay.
to get grain and
Right.
they don't recognize him, but he recognizes them
Mm-hmm.
and he thinks that they're coming as like he doesn't know that they don't recognize who he is. So he thinks they're coming as spies to.
You said Joseph doesn't know, or the brothers don't know?
The brothers don't know that he doesn't, like he knows who they are, but they don't
Yeah,
know who he
so
is.
Joseph knows who they are.
Yeah.
But they don't know who Joseph is.
Right.
All right. Something that is said a little bit later, but just will help us give context. Joseph speaks to a translator. So he's not speaking in the same language, he's speaking to a translator. Right. So that comes later, but just giving some context. All right. But emotionally, what's happening to Joseph?
I feel like he has like PTSD, like he's traumatized. Like
Right?
he's traumatized.
He is traumatized. Right? Look at phase one. Okay. What do you like? What stands out to you with respect to Joseph and phase one? I'm gonna kind of quickly go back in the slides so everybody online can see it.
I think he's still processing his emotions. Like he's giving them the like poker face. He didn't get angry. He didn't show compassion. He didn't do anything. He was just talking as like a strange man, like in a tough way,
Yeah.
like as like a king talking to like some people. Like so, yeah. He didn't show anything like either positive or negative.
What else?
I don't know if he did that on purpose because he wants his dad and Benjamin to bring them with them without knowing anything, to make sure that they all together be in Egypt and see all of them.
So you think like from this point, he's already thinking like, well, how am I going to get them? Okay. Do you think that Joseph to this point has dealt with his hurt? What in the verses?
He spoke roughly to them, then he said to them, where do you come from?
Okay. So he spoke roughly. I mean, so he's not being so nice, right? Like when I kind of read these verses, there's something the way I say it, like they came, they bowed down, and then what Scripture says is verse 9 says, then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamt about them, right? So I think he's referring to the first dream, which was all the stalks of grain bowed down, and his stalk is not, and he's standing straight up, right? So he remembers the dream, which kind of says like he's kind of suppressed this, right? This has been like in the back of his mind, hasn't dealt with it, right? But in the back of his mind, and then boom, like the dream comes because all the brothers come and they bow down. They know he's the ruler of the land. The dream comes, and then the pit, Potiphar, prison, like 20 years of life, just like in the blink of an eye. And then he like, you're spies. Like, it's a bold statement. It's kind of nonsensical, to be honest. Like to just say like you're spies, based on what? Right? I think it's based on PTSD. Like he hasn't really dealt with what's going on.
I didn't get the nakedness of the land. What does it mean?
Like they're coming and they're looking and saying like, okay, how can we steal from Egypt? Like,
Steal?
yeah, like they're coming in as spies to see what are the weak points in Egypt so that we can come in with an army in order to, ravage or get grain because, word had spread that, and we're about 2 years into the drought by this time, word had spread that Egypt was the only place that had grain because Joseph prepared it, but nobody else knew to prepare. So clearly Egypt has to have its like defenses up because they know people are going to come, right? So from that respect, yes, saying they're spies, but he knows who they are, right? He knows they're not spies, but like he's projected, right? He's upset. Where would you put him in his journey of forgiveness?
Phase one.
Phase one, right? I agree.
And in the end, he cried, he couldn't stand seeing them all. And
We are going to get there. We are going to get there. So we just finished 12. Let's go to 13. We're going to read 13 through 20. Verse 13, Genesis 42, 13 through 20.
And they said, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. But Joseph said to them, it is as I spoke to you, saying, you are spies. In this manner you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there is any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. So he put them all together in prison 3 days. Then Joseph said to them the third day, do this and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine of your houses, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, sorry.
Yeah. All right. So we have this scene where the conversation is evolving, right? He's sticking to your spies, and they're like, no, we're not spies, and they're trying to say we're good men, and here's our family, and we're 12 brothers, and the youngest one is still at home because dad won't let him come out, and our other one, like he died. So they're trying to verify that they're not spies. Right? And so he throws them all in prison. And how long do they stay in prison?
3 years.
Okay. What was the condition going, like, what did he say to them going into prison? Right? Look at verse 15.
You should be tested.
Yeah. In this manner you should be tested by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there's any truth in you. Right? So I'm going to keep you all here. I'm going to send one. 3 days later, what does Joseph settle? Huh?
The opposite.
The opposite.
Everybody goes wrong.
All right. The reason why I point this out is like we get fired up. We get triggered when we're dealing with pain. And when you look at Joseph, like he took a step back, right? He let them simmer, but it was less about them simmering in prison than Joseph giving himself time to simmer down, right? And when we're in a process of forgiveness and we get triggered, it's important to allow ourselves to simmer down, right? Because we need to process what's going on inside of us. And when we don't process, right, we often make really bad decisions. Like knowing, like we're going to look into what the family situation is at home after this event. And what you're going to see is that there's no way, had one brother gone back, that Benjamin would have been coming, right? Because it took all 9 of them to, eventually come back with Benjamin, right? So we need gaps of time in our journey of forgiveness in order to kind of calm down, to rethink things, and then come out with a better decision, right?
So did he feel bad and like tell them, okay, take grain for your houses? Like,
It's coming up.
okay.
Sit tight, we're gonna get there. All right. So just remember, take gaps in our process of forgiveness. Right? Joseph took 3 days. This whole thing is happening over a long period of time, right? But right now he took 3 days. And sometimes, like when we're intensely fired up, sometimes we do need a couple days in order to come back to the situation and think about, well, what's a better way for me to deal with this? All right, now we're going to go to 21.
So,
yes,
like the 3 days, which phase like defines the 3 days here?
I mean, I
think he's still in phase 1.
Yeah,
Still
I would probably say he's still in phase 1. This is all very acute and very like intense. So he's in phase 1, he's figuring it out because he has not had to deal with his anger in this sort of way. I'm sure there are nights where he gets frustrated and thinks about it, but he had avoided dealing with it because he's been very busy, right? And he hasn't really faced his anger. But this was like right in front of his face.
So like he's cooling down, like he's calming.
He's kind of cooling off a little bit,
Okay.
right? But he's still hot.
Okay.
He's still hot. Let's read 21 through 24. And this is, sorry, so this is the brothers kind of having an internal discussion, trying to make sense of what happened. Okay. After Joseph said, okay, keep one and you guys go back. So that's where we're at. The brothers are responding to that.
Then they said to
Then
him,
they said to one another, "We are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear him. Therefore, the distress has come upon us." And Reuben answered them, saying, "Did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy? And you would not listen. Therefore, behold, the blood is now required of us. But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And he turned himself away from them and wept. And he returned to them again and talked with them. And he took Simeon, from them and bound them before their eyes.
All right, thanks. So Joseph is very highly emotional, right? He's listening to them. He knows what they're saying. They have no idea because he's speaking through an interpreter, right? And like you were saying earlier, like he has to give himself a break. This conversation of them like just saying like, oh gosh, this is like all those years ago what we did to Joseph, like it's coming around to finally bite us, right? Which I mean, we do this, right? When bad things happen, we're like, oh, what did I do like to deserve this? And so they're trying to make sense of it, which is a very normal human emotion and a response to a very stressful situation, right? But this is hard for Joseph, right? To really get like insider like knowledge to what played out all those years ago when he was just walking to check up on them with his beautiful, colorful coat and gets thrown in the pit, right? It's a really traumatic experience. And so to finally be on the inside, to hear them talking about that, again, very triggering, very like, you know, a lot of PTSD happening here. He has to leave to get his composure. And then, you know, in that process, he's continuing to uncover how deep this pain is, right? And as this goes on, he's realizing how hurt he is, right? Which we need to do too. We need to really begin to understand how deep our pain is. And that happens like over time. It's not pleasant. This is not a pleasant experience for Joseph. It is a necessary experience for him in order to get to where he ends up at the end. All right.
Yeah, but like I wonder if they didn't show regret in front of him, would he still be crying and like
I don't know. I mean, could go a bunch of different ways. All right, let's read 25 through 28.
Then Joseph gave a command to fill their sacks with grain, to restore every man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. Thus he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with the grain and departed from there. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money. There was in the mouth of his sack. So he said to his brothers, my money has been restored, and there it is in my sack. Then their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this that God has done to us?
All right. So they, just gives them grain, puts the money back in each of their bags, and sends them on their way. At the first rest stop, they realize, like, oh, we have grain and our money. Right? Why do you think Joseph restored their money to them? And what do you think it says about his journey of forgiveness?
I feel like this may have been a test to see if they're the same old brothers or not. And perhaps it reflects that he's still early in his journey. Like he's deciding, like, should I forgive them or not? Like that's where he is.
I feel like he's kind of like playing with their emotions. Like he's like giving and taking, like putting them in jail, taking them out. Like he still isn't sure what he wants to do. And in the meantime, he's like, he has like authority now. He can do whatever he wants, and he's kind of taking advantage of that to do whatever he wants, like play around with them. So.
And it's strange why he didn't reveal his identity, like, because when you forgive someone, you want to show like you forgive them, like, okay, this is the one you hurt him, like, and I'm forgiving you. So the fact you like, I don't want to say you don't care anymore, but like you're accepting the fact, like, okay, forgiveness is like an internal process. It doesn't have to deal with, like the other person doesn't have to know if I forgive him or not. But like it's like it's inside me, and I feel like he did it inside him, and he didn't want to like reveal his identity to you.
I agree. Like he's not ready to forgive. He's far from it, right?
I think he's pressing on them to see if they have regretted what they have done to him, or they are the same people, the same person.
Yeah.
Long time ago.
Yeah,
Would
I
they
mean,
have changed it?
Yeah, I think he's kind of leveraging his power. He's trying to figure out like what he can, right, about the situation. You know, are you guys the same jerks that I remember like all those years ago, or like a little bit better? You know, he's trying to figure it out. You know, and I'll be honest, I don't know. Like, is he putting the money back in their sacks in order to build a case of dishonesty against them? Right? Or is he, you know, trying to take a step of giving them a gift of compassion, knowing that like, hey, they're struggling. I'm upset, but this is my family. I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe he's testing them to see, like, he's trying to like help them remember what they did in the past to see if they can process the wrongdoings and to be honest with themselves.
I'm sure it's all mixed in. Yeah, it's hard. Like, and I think we can only go so deep before we like continue to just guess like what's happening. But it's good to kind of like throw out all the possibilities, right? Because the main point that I want us to take away is that Joseph is fluctuating in this process of forgiveness, right? He's discovering anger. He's like trying to understand like the situation, as we're saying, like he's pushing them to see like, well, what's happening at home? Is dad alive? Is Benjamin alive? Like, what's the situation? I'm really angry at you. You're spies. Like, he's all over the place, right? He's going through. It's normal, right? Verses 29 through 35, we're going to skip, and it's essentially the brothers eventually make it back to Egypt, and they recount everything that happened in Egypt to Jacob. So Jacob sees them, realizes Simeon's not there. They tell Jacob everything that happened. We got the grain, our money is still in the bag, you know, all this stuff. Let's jump to verse 36, and we're going to do 36 through 38, and this is where we're going to end off today, which is Jacob's response to their journey. Okay? Genesis 42, 36 through 38.
And Jacob their father said to them, "You have bereaved me. Joseph is no more. Simeon is no more. And you want to take Benjamin? All these things are against me." Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, "Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you." But he said, "My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If any calamity should befall him along the way in which you go, then you would bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave."
All right. So Jacob continues to ooze his favoritism towards Rachel, who was the father of Joseph and Benjamin. And, you know, he is willing to lose another son rather than risk Benjamin. Right? And it's important because this is going to become a big point of contention for the family, and we're going to see that as we open up in chapter 43 next week. But hey, I'm wrapping up. Okay? Right? But what I think is important to see is like everybody is fighting like their family scripts, like all these messages that we've inherited, from our families throughout the years. And what we looked at in week 1, when we opened up the story of Joseph, of how favoritism was a huge thing in Jacob's family and in the lineage. Like, and it can really cloud somebody's judgment on the situation. Jacob is Jacob. He's a difficult person. He's a complicated person, right? And he's not, at this point, willing to risk Benjamin. He's okay with losing another son, even though there's a chance that Benjamin could come back. But like, he's not gonna risk Benjamin at this point. Which really puts this family in a spin. But also just think about the time that it's going to give Joseph to process. And Simeon's just going to chill in prison for a little bit. And not much we can do about that. And Jacob has to sit with kind of the inevitable situation that the drought is going on and eventually our food is going to grow thin. Right? So that's where we're going to leave it tonight. Any questions or thoughts? Yeah.
Where did you get the definition of your forgiveness?
From the book Forgiveness is a Choice by Ern Wright, I think is the author's name. I sat at home and I wrote it all by myself.
Hey, bestseller.
Plagiarism is just not remembering where you got something from. Right? Sorry, originality is not remembering where you got something from. All right. Any last questions? Forgiveness is a journey, and we're seeing it with Joseph, and we have to see it with others. And we have to see the journey in our lives. Close in prayer. My Father, Son, and Spirit, one God, amen. Thank you, Lord, for this day, this opportunity to continue our look at Joseph. May you continue to strengthen us as we see him struggle with forgiveness. Help us to take up our own battles with forgiveness. It is so important that we struggle. It is so important that we pursue forgiveness, Lord, because truly we are the ones who find freedom. We are the ones who find rest. And we are the ones who win when we choose to forgive. But it is not overnight. It is not an easy process, but it's a necessary process. So help us to all soak in that process for ourselves through the intercessions of all your saints who have pleased you from the beginning. Hear us as we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Amen. Will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, free from those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thy kingdom, power, and glory,